Hello everyone, welcome to the Tech Podcast series. This is Lakshit Pant from Azure Developer Community, your host for today, and welcome to another episode of the Tech Podcast series. Here we have been engaging with multiple industry leaders, executives to understand what's going in and around this in the startup ecosystem. And for today's podcast, here uh, we have here with us Ankit Durga. He's the co-founder of Fundamento. And to kick off the things, I'll just quickly introduce Fundamento. It's an AI contact center solution for all the enterprises. So to kick off the things, Ankit, if you could just introduce yourself first.
Sure. Thank you, Lakshit. Thanks for having me here. My name is Ankit. I am the co-founder and CEO of Fundamento.ai. Like you mentioned, Fundamento is a contact center automation solution. Fundamento now is about almost 3 years old. We started this about 3 years ago. But this is my second venture. I'm a two-time entrepreneur. The first one is a social enterprise called Leap Skills, where we essentially train students from tier 3, tier 4 cities and got them jobs with large employers. That started in 2013, so I have been an entrepreneur now for 10 years. Technology in my skill set is relatively recent. I dabbled in technology first within Leap Skills when we were building an app to be able to deliver training programs in areas where there was very little internet. So it was a very challenging build, but it was very exciting as well. It was something that had not been done before. And that's essentially when I started working on technology, and through it's through the scaling up of Leap that we arrived at the idea of Fundamento, and that's how we spun off Fundamento from Leap. And now Fundamento obviously runs its own vision and has its own team and DNA. And before that, I studied from Delhi University. I started my career with Ernst & Young and moved on to Zomato very quickly. This is very early on in Zomato, when Zomato was just in year 3. We just raised our first round of funding at that point in time. Spent some time with the founders there, got to learn a lot, and that's essentially what got me excited about entrepreneurship in the first place. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's very fantastic to know. And I totally believe startup gives you a very diverse ecosystem. It gives you a way to think, to broaden
Absolutely.
your mindset, right? So that
Yeah.
that ecosystem is very for anyone who is really starting to build a career, who wants to learn things first. I would say joining a startup would be the first step one should do, right? So from
Yes.
30,000, if you have to explain the fundamental AI to our audience, if you can quickly do for from a 30,000 feet, please go ahead.
Sure. So, as an AI, AI focused or AI based contact center automation solution, we essentially have two products at Fundamental. One is an agent assist, which is basically a co-pilot for contact center agents. Now, these agents can either be customer service agents, typically people you talk to from, services and companies that you use, or brands that you typically use for a variety of reasons in your life. And or they can also be sales agents, so they could be, for example, sales in the financial services space, specifically, that sell you different kinds of products, starting from credit cards to insurance and so on and so forth. So that's an agent assist, so it's essentially a co-pilot. And the other product that we have is a virtual agent, which is basically a voice bot which is able to handle upstream conversations. Now, unlike some of the existing voice bots which are able to handle very simplistic and straightforward conversations, the idea behind what we are building essentially is the bot should essentially be able to have complex downstream conversations also, which may include multiple digressions, multiple intents, and that's something that we've essentially built out, which is able to handle enterprise grade complexity. So those are the two big products that we have live at the moment, and typically, like I mentioned, our customers are enterprises. So these could be companies, and some of our clients include companies like IndiaMart, Paisabazaar, Disney Hotstar. So these are some of our larger clients, and the idea essentially is to be able to train models for them, so that either the agent assist or the virtual agent, depending on what their current need is, can be deployed.
Yeah, this podcast is going to be very interesting because for in right now we are talking about Copilot and something that a chat bot
Yeah.
or maybe a voice bot, I would say, which is replacing kind of a salesman's, right? Cold calling, I would say. So, but my first question would be, when I was doing my homework for this podcast, I saw one very one big metrics right over there, that 80% of the center costs for enterprises. So I just wanted to understand, how does Fundamentos AI the tech you have built contributes to saving up to that 80% matrices. How you have defined those matrices? If you could just elaborate.
That typically HTs are different in different industries and different use cases. But there is typically in a conversation that an agent has with you, there is a lot of time spent on understanding the issue. There could be multiple resolution paths that the agent can take, so they have to kind of try and test out different paths, and then eventually the solution is found, and that's when you get the solution. So this, I mean, this is a large chunk of the HT. With the Copilot, we want to be able to handhold the agent through a very specific, workflow once the intent has been identified, and guide them through a very, very guided workflow that really reduces the average handling time. Another metric, and I can keep going on and on, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Another metric is ACW, which is after call work. Every time the agent actually who's talking to you puts down the phone, and while you're filling up the feedback or giving feedback to the agent's interaction with you, the agent has to go and fill out comments. Has to write opening remarks, what was the problem, closing remarks, how did you address the solution. You may have certain follow-ups that need to be done. So all of those essentially, that manual typing and that entry of that data can be automated using the agent assist. So reducing AHT, reducing ACW. Another one is wrap time, which is essentially, call centers are very high attrition workspaces. Typically, it's not an aspirational job, to be honest. I'm sure you're aware. Not everyone wants to do a call center job. So they end up quitting very often. So there are new
Right.
people joining in every day.
Right.
And to be able to train them, it takes a lot of time to be able to make sure that they understand company processes, they understand what's the workflow that they're supposed to follow. It takes a little bit of time. So with the agent assist, actually, it's faster because the agent assist is almost given. It's giving the agent a script that he or she is supposed to follow. So those new agents can be onboarded faster, and that saves time. So I mean, so cost has multiple components or multiple sub parameters that we essentially look at, and we sort of tackle them one by one to be able to make sure that we are able to showcase ROI to our customers over time, and that's what then leads to an 80% reduction in cost.
More often, I would say maybe I won't say they're replacing the terms. I wouldn't say replacing the. I won't use the term replacing, but it's more of an efficiency tool that you have built, right? If I'm not wrong.
I mean, we don't endorse replacement in a big way, but we do have a voice bot that is able to handle complicated conversations, like I mentioned earlier. So yes, the first thing that we do from a cost perspective is augment the agent's actions and workflows so that it's efficient, like you shared, and also so
Yes.
that there is there's time can be shaved off wherever possible. But over time, we also realize that there are certain kinds of calls and dispositions that customers call with, which are very, very simple to tackle, or which have straightforward workflows. Right? You don't require human intervention for all of the dispositions. So that's where we deploy voice bots, and they end up actually taking away a large percentage of the call. So the way we look at it is that as you're scaling your contact center, we will be able to sort of make sure that you are able to do it with the same number of people as opposed to having to grow your teams, proportionately. That's essentially how we look at it.
So now, when we talk more about the product, what sets the AI, the native AI that you have built, the tech part that you have built, apart in terms of industry vetting, enterprise grade security, and efficiency? Because when we talk about AI, there is a lots of in and out that is going with the data, right? And the data is the most crucial thing right now. And with AI coming into the
Right.
play, there has been more multiple governance issues that has been introduced in the that has been
Absolutely.
we pretty much have been known right in the market. So, what are your thoughts about this?
All of that is true. Everything that you said is definitely correct. And I think in the enterprise space, this becomes even more important because enterprises are a lot more careful about their data than, let's say, a smaller company or a medium-sized company would be. So for us, addressing these enterprise priorities is a huge concern. And we've actually, the way we've engineered the solution is, it keeps in mind and safeguards all of these concerns that enterprises have. So I think two, three big differentiators, and of course, if you look under the hood and look at our tooling, then you'll be able to see the results which speak for themselves. But I'll still point out some of the larger points. It's difficult to differentiate AI solutions specifically because foundational models that all of us are using are exactly the same, right? Like, so we'll either use an Azure OpenAI kind of service, or we'll use a Google's Vertex, or you'll use a Meta Llama 2. Like, there are only those many options that you have from a foundational standpoint that you use.
Right.
Having said that, I think when you look at the layering of the product and the stack, that's where differentiation really comes into play. I think number one differentiator for us is our industry focus. Travel and financial services are two areas where we are disrupting heavily. There are use cases that we've identified and areas that we've identified where we understand the problem more deeply than most. And we've trained our models and fine tuned our models to be able to address those specific use cases. And that's where our moat comes into play. I think, given this volume of the scale of data that we have and the kind of tuning and fine tuning that we've been able to do, I think that's something that's really helped us build a solution that if any travel company or financial services company deploys us today, they'll be able to start ahead of the curve as opposed to starting from scratch. I think that becomes one key advantage with us. The other area where we are disrupting heavily is how we deploy our solutions. So we are IBM partners. We essentially have a rev share with IBM for some of our partnerships and for our GTM as well. And with IBM, essentially, we deploy on-prem. So that's a possibility that we have. So we can either deploy on private cloud or on-prem. And with enterprises specifically, given the data security and governance concerns that you mentioned, on-prem actually is preferred because it makes sure that most of your data essentially is within your premises. And that is really, really critical for some of the companies that we work with. And also, I think with specific models like IBM's Granite 13B and certain other smaller models which are actually more fine-tuned and better trained for certain industry use cases, that's where we get serious advantages. And when we have enterprise partnerships like IBM, we also are Google partners. We are also Google funded. We have a Microsoft partnership as well. I think these enterprise partnerships and big tech partnerships help us make sure that we are able to engineer in a way that is the most secure. So we have a plug and play system. It's modular. So you'll essentially be able to use the LLM and use the service that makes the most sense to you. I'll give you one example. One of our clients, Disney Hotstar, has a mandate from Disney to not use OpenAI services. So in their case, we've actually been able to build it modularly and actually incorporate another model to be able to make sure that we're able to solve for them. And at the larger level, IBM also gives us indemnity. We are indemnified against any data and security and governance related leakages. So that's essentially how we've actually, we have the architecture built for an enterprise, workflow.
So, how has the market responded when for the fundamentals products, and what challenges? Every business has its own challenge, right? What challenges have you encountered in introducing your AI and the automation of the contact center, especially?
GenAI has, of course, commoditized AI to a large extent. It's made it consumable. And as a result, there is definitely a lot of tailwinds within enterprises where business leaders are talking about how can we incorporate AI in our solutions and how can we ensure that we are able to augment our offerings through AI. So that's actually something that is plays to our advantage, to be honest, because while the problem may not be clearly defined, there is definitely interest. So that's the first thing that I'd like to point out with AI solutions at the moment this year. Secondly, I think from an operational standpoint, cost has become a huge concern. Overall, this has definitely been true for startups, and making sure that you're watching your bottom line. But it's also globally, and especially in the enterprise space, it's always been a concern. So when you kind of go in with a very clear value proposition, like we are going to reduce your cost, and we are going to have a significant bottom line impact, I think that's what gets people's attention, to be honest. And that's any startup, any value proposition that you go out with. It has to either increase their revenue, reduce their cost, or has to tackle their risk.
Right.
So in our case, we handle the cost factor, and that's kind of what we are promising. We've also done a lot of work in the sales enablement space, which improves the top line as well. But our right now, most of the traction that we've been getting is on the cost front. In terms of the challenges that they've been facing, like I mentioned earlier, the metrics that I mentioned, AHT, making sure that you're able to improve ramp time. I think these are some of the larger concerns that enterprises have while running a tight contact center operation. And of course, it's difficult to engineer given the diversity of use cases that we encounter. But I think for us, given the industry focus, like I mentioned, in the financial services space as well as the travel space, we've been able to narrow the problem down for ourselves a little bit so that we are able to deliver more effectively.
As you have spoken about the generative AI, I would really want to know what role do you think Gen AI will play in future, especially in when we talk about future. When I say future, future of contact center solutions, and how you know how you see your product position in that regard.
So Gen AI, to be honest, like I said, has been very successful in making AI consumable and commoditized. But it's not one sudden magic wand that's come into play.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't think it has solutions for the enterprise space. Any significantly different or impactful solutions for the enterprise space. It definitely has been able to. I think the two three things that Gen AI has been able to do so far is, one, automate some of the tasks that were manual before or that were time taking. I think that's a huge improvement that's happened as a result of Gen AI. Secondly, when it comes to just conversational elements, especially when you're looking at conversational intelligence, Gen AI has been able to add a lot of value there, so that when the machine is talking, the machine sounds as human-like as possible because it's been trained on data
Right.
that is human-based conversations. So there are definitely elements of the contact center workflow that have been augmented or improved as a result of Gen AI. Having said that, given how critical enterprise spaces are and how risk averse enterprise need to be, Gen AI is still a little scary, to be honest, because in spite of the best prompt engineering, best fine tuning, LLMs do hallucinate, right? So there is a little bit of a lack of consistency in LLM responses, which is not comfortable for enterprises to deploy in front of the customer just yet. LLMs essentially do need to be layered with uh, still some of the rule-based mechanisms to be able to make sure that there is accuracy and there is consistency in responses. So it's almost like a nice wrapper that's come into the rule-based layer, but it's not the solution because it's just not there in terms of consistency and accuracy just yet. In spite of you handling temperatures and hallucination to the best of your ability, it still doesn't play out exactly the way you'd like. So there's a lot of work to be done, to be honest, on the Gen AI front. I feel like enterprises and SaaS building for enterprises needs to be given more control of the training and of the responses that will come out of the LLMs. And right now, that's just not an option that most companies have. And secondly, the other big concern is pricing. The way Gen AI right now is priced is prohibitively expensive. It's kind of priced for the consumer. It's not priced for enterprise use cases. But it's evolving. We are aware of the fact, given that we work with all of these different companies directly, we are aware of the fact that the pricing is evolving, but it's not there in terms of making it enterprise friendly just yet.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree with all the points that you made, and because the kind of volume that we have here in India, that makes it more easy to make a buzz, any to make anything around a buzz, right? So it's pretty much evident from the fact. Now,
Absolutely.
from a leadership person, I would like to know what advice do you have for other startups looking to venture into the AI space based on your journey experiences.
Look, I mean, I find it very scary to give advice to other entrepreneurs because everyone's trying so hard and trying to solve such serious problems. So it's always a little tricky because I don't mean to be discouraging for everyone or for anyone. But the only thing that, I mean, given my two-time entrepreneurship experience, I think the only advice that I have is that try and understand the problem very deeply, especially in AI. Just because there's a lot of noise and there's some exciting and fascinating tooling that's available to play around with, does not mean that you have to go out and build something. I think it's really, really important that you understand the problem, you understand the intricacies of the problem and the complexities of the problem, and only then do you actually sort of visualize the solution and then see where AI fits in. I think that has really played to our advantage. We still have a long way to go, to be honest, at Fundamento. But I think the reason we've been able to get early traction and enterprise traction from good names is because we have really spent a lot of time trying to understand what are the problems that these enterprises are facing. What are their priorities in terms of not just the financial metrics, just in terms of cost or profit, but also in terms of like we were talking earlier about enterprise grade security, about just the deployment, latency, performance. These are all things which are very, very high priority for enterprises. uh, Everyone needs to kind of, if you're building for companies small or big, you really need to understand what their challenges are and then engineer and then see where AI fits in, as opposed to the other way around. You can't start with AI and then see where AI can fit. It should be solution, problem solution first, and then seeing how can you improve the tooling, how can you improve for efficiency and automation using AI, not the other way around. So that's actually something I notice with certain AI, startups who are trying to solve for problems, but they've actually gone the other way, where they've kind of visualized it based on the ability of AI as opposed to exactly the problem that the customers have.
Yeah, I shared the same thought, and even just a little bit rephrased, but I heard the same thoughtful statement from one of the great leaders of the this tech ecosystem today on this fortnight. And he mentioned about this very fine term that you have mentioned, like most of the, especially after this AI buzz, right, or in a post COVID, most of these young entrepreneurs are trying to find a problem and solve AI with it. Means they are just, they know AI, and now they are sort of trying to find a problem which can be solved using AI. But it
Correct.
needs to be the other way around. You have to find a problem and try to, what where the AI could fit in, try to find a part where AI could fit in or automate, right? So it's
Yeah.
definitely something that one should focus on, I would say. Now, as we are reaching to the end of this podcast, I would really like to know, what impact do you expect on the employment patterns, particularly in the industry that heavily rely on the contact center for customer interaction. From your experience, what do you think, how it will affect the employment patterns?
Okay, I don't want to mince my words here. To be honest, I do think employment will be significantly impacted here. This is going to be one of the first areas where employment will be impacted because, at least from a customer service and experience standpoint, technology has a lot of disproportionate value addition that it can make, as opposed to some of the other areas where human interactions are still important. Sales, for example, I don't think is that easy to automate. I don't think AI can replace sales because the impact of a human conversation, the back and forth, the negotiations, the intricacies of that conversation are difficult to replicate in a machine. But at least from an experience standpoint, where I have a specific problem and I need that resolved, that's, I think, the low hanging fruit in the contact center ecosystem for automation. So I do think that those jobs are going to be impacted. I feel like the ability, and again from an employment standpoint, I think there are many things that we don't foresee today that will become very obvious tomorrow. So what we need to do as young professionals who are entering the workspace, and this is my honest advice, given that I'm also coming from the training space, is that young professionals today need to learn how to sort of learn new things, because in terms of technology, in terms of tooling, in terms of any kind of input that they need to be able to do their job well, all of those things are changing very rapidly. We cannot predict what's going to happen tomorrow. I do think, I have a strong feeling that the contact center, customer experience, customer success space is going to be disrupted heavily. So those jobs I do think are going to be affected. But having said that, if we have the skill set to be able to be agile and learn quickly, I do think that that's not something that we should worry about. But it's a skill set that needs to be developed. So yeah, so definitely worry around the customer experience side, not so much on the sales aspect right now, sales perspective.
Perfect. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's what I was looking for, the honest answer. And maybe due to paucity of time, I have a couple of more questions, but I'll just wrap it up with my last question. That is, what are the metrics of success for you? Is it the number of customer you are onboarding? Is the number of partnership you are going through, or what's the metrics of success for you?
No, I mean, it needs to be driven by the business, to be honest. So for us, it starts with our billing. Our ARR obviously is our North Star metric. What's the kind of recurring revenue that we are being able to build? That depends on obviously the number of customers and engagements that we have. We obviously have different kinds of ICPs or personas of customers that we interact with. The enterprise customers are obviously larger bills, as opposed to the slightly smaller ones can be smaller bills. So we have a good mix that we've planned to be able to make sure that we're able to hit the ARR targets that we are talking about. In terms of the product itself, of course, there are many elements and many metrics that we sort of track over time. The first one, of course, is accuracy. We have our LHF built in to be able to give us feedback on whether the model is throwing out accurate results or not. Latency is actually something that keeps us up at night, to be able to make sure that we are being able to, the performance is optimized. LLMs, of course, have inherently high latency. That's obviously a big concern that we have. We also are in a country which is multilingual, so translation transcription also has high latency.
Definitely. And thanks for all those thoughtful insights. Here we go with the end of this podcast. And to all our audience, thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you learned some insightful terms and about the honest terms that Ankit has mentioned today. And it will really help you to upskill and to build, to think again, to rethink yourself and out define what could work out and what could not. And keep upskilling yourself. We are coming up with so many initiatives. And thank you for joining us for this podcast, Ankit. It was really my pleasure to host you and looking forward to collaborate again in the future.